If you go to Current magazine, the last issue, it has a whole history on this guy. I mean, he forced women to have sex with him. He had people beaten to death. I mean, he owned 120 slaves, according to Current magazine. And his father, I think, owned 1,200. His father started Vermilionville. After he stole all the land from Opelousas to here, Vermilionville was right there on the Vermilion River. A Confederate monument is horrifying. I mean, it just reinforces racism and Nazism. They ought to take this statue and bring it 3 blocks away to the Mouton home. And let's put someone that we named our town after Marquis de Lafayette. There's a statue at the courthouse, city courthouse. They could put it up there. I have no problem with his having a statue. I just don't want to see it on public ground.
The statue represents Jim Crow, a period in time when African Americans were relegated to second-class citizens, having formerly known as laws that pertain specifically to black people, forced upon blacks without cause. You know, it's time that Lafayette takes this statue down because it represents something that is not favorable for our community. It represents a period when racism existed to its highest levels. We live here, we are one community, we are one people, we are one country. And, you know, we want Lafayette to begin to behave in that manner. We're not interested in destroying the statue. The statue is here and exists to teach a lesson. And the lesson we want it to teach is a lesson that should take place in a museum. This statue tells half a story. It tells the story of the Jim Crow era and the Confederacy. The other half of that story is the lives of the slaves who helped build this city and this country. That part of the history is not represented by that statue, and that's why we think this statue, along with the history of slavery, should be in a museum. And that way, a teaching experience can occur.
There's a dearth of information in American history textbooks about the true causes of the Civil War and the Reconstruction and Jim Crow era after that. This statue was actually put up in 1922, not really specifically to monumentalize the Civil War, but as a symbol of subjugation during the Jim Crow era. Many such statues all over the country. Subjugation of African American people that have to walk past this every day. Mouton was, of course, a Confederate general. From what I understand, a slave patroller. Harried slaves that were trying to, you know, go back and forth between one plantation or the other and so forth, and a slave owner.
Now, with this being, what does this change
Black folks will not have to walk past this whenever they are downtown and become upset and humiliated that this romanticism of the Civil War and the Jim Crow era and white supremacy is something they have to look at. I think the African American community is pretty aware of what these sorts of monuments all over the country really stand for. And unfortunately, like I said, it is not taught in public schools. I would actually push for our public school textbooks and our private school textbooks to include some teaching on Reconstruction in the Jim Crow era.
I think these statues have worth in the appropriate context. If it's something to learn from, I think that's great. If it's a trophy celebrating what these guys did, it's not, because there's nothing to celebrate about what they fought for. I think it's an ugly part of our history, and it's something that we do need to put behind us, and it's hard to do that when they're in our faces every day. How do people feel when they walk down the street? You know, when I walk down the street, if I didn't read this, I would feel fine with it. It bothers me now because I know how my son would feel walking by it. He's very well educated. He knows what these guys were fighting for, and the fact that we celebrate them as a culture, you know, that can't feel too good to him. And so I'm here for him.
Mouton Mindset was formed in 2016. It was a response to the public discussion on the Mouton statue, the one that we're here in front of today. The public wasn't at a place where the council would move to take down the statue. So Mouton Mindset is about moving the way the public thinks about this issue through education, outreach, those kind of things. And so they've had documentaries, they've had a book club, we've had events, we've had talks, we've had meetings. And then after everything happened in Charlottesville a couple of weeks ago, I mean, this changed everything, not only here but around the country. The perception became very clear about what these statues are about. They're about white supremacy. They weren't erected right after the war. This statue was up over 60 years after the war was over. So it has another purpose. And when you learn about the history of these statues, as we're doing with all this attention that's being paid to them now, they were erected as monuments to white supremacy in an era after separate but equal was the law of the land. Segregation was legal, but we never had separate and equal. Separate was never equal. And in fact, the whole civil rights movement was about overturning Plessy v. Ferguson and the Jim Crow era. So these things continue to speak, even though no one pays much attention to them. International visitors come here to the International Center. The first thing they see is a statue of a slave owner. You know, the rest of the world abandoned slavery a long time before the United States did, and these statues speak even though they stand silent. So we need to take, the message is no longer valid, we need to take it down. Statues and monuments speak. They carry a message, and the original intent of these statues was to uphold and celebrate white supremacy. That is not a value that we accept in our country today. It's not a value we should accept in our community today. Well, look, Lafayette tries to present itself as a progressive community, but you can't do that if you're not letting everybody participate fully. And Lafayette has never allowed full participation in its civic, business, and cultural life. And so these monuments like this are part of that division. So for Lafayette to reach its potential, everybody needs to stand equal at the table. And that's what we continue to work on. Thank you.
I'm chairman of this organization called Move the Mindset. And just to give you an inkling of who we are, I'd like to tell you our mandate, first of all, to educate the citizens of Lafayette about the history, including the Civil War, Reconstruction, the Lost Cause ideology, the Jim Crow era, and the Civil Rights era. Second, to expose the false narratives, misconceptions, and attitudes that continue to create distrust and division in the city of Lafayette. And third, to eradicate obstacles to healthy community relations in Lafayette. Our core values are integrity, respect, unity, and cooperation. Now our main purpose for today is to relate to you the contents of a press release that has just been distributed to the Mayor President of the city, the Parish Council, and the United Daughters of the Confederacy. This press release reads as follows. Open letter to Mayor President Joel Robideau, the Lafayette City Parish Council, and the United Daughters of the Confederacy, Alfred Mouton, Chapter 1514. It is time for Lafayette Confederate Monument to come down. Our organization, Move the Mindset, and others have argued that its prominent downtown location on property owned by all Lafayette taxpayers is not appropriate. This statue was erected in support of white supremacy almost 60 years after the Civil War ended, during the Jim Crow era, when Southern whites relegated African Americans to second-class citizenship and deprived them of their rights they gained after the Civil War. Recent events show that these statues are still rallying points for white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and others who espouse hatred, bigotry, and violence. These values have no place in our country or in our community. This monument should certainly not be the symbol in front of the Lafayette Office of International Affairs I'm pointing to, or any other public space that greets visitors to our city. As American historian Eric Foner observed, historical monuments are an expression of power, an indication of who has the power to choose how history is remembered in public places. Foner goes on to say Confederate statues only honor one part of our past. Where are the statues in the former slave states honoring very large part of the Southern population, beginning with 4 million slaves that sided with the Union rather than the Confederacy? Where are the monuments to the victims of slavery or to the hundreds of black lawmakers who, during Reconstruction, served in positions from U.S. senators and governors to justice of the peace and school board members? Excluding blacks from historical recognition has been the other side of history of glorifying the Confederacy. We don't want to deny history. We support the relocation of the statue to a museum where our full shared history can be told. We addressed this letter jointly to the city, parish, mayor, president, and council, and the local chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. We are calling on these bodies to move the statue from this public space. We suggest the statue be returned to the local chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy or be moved to a museum. Whatever the decision regarding the ultimate placement of this Confederate statue, it's been called the Confederate statue when it really should be referred to as a Jim Crow symbol.
Yes.
It must be moved from the offensive, inappropriate location of public space that it currently occupies. Your immediate attention, review, and response to the request outlined is greatly appreciated. Please feel free to contact me if additional input and decision would be helpful to resolve this very important matter. And I'd like to thank a number of organizations who have joined us and are supportive of us. You're going to hear a 3-minute speech from each of them, but I'd like to announce who they are. Ms. Marja Broussard, President of the NAACP, Ms. Sally Donlin, President of Democratic Women of Acadiana, Reverend Carlos Harmon, pastor of a local church, Ms. Jacqueline Phelps, Vice President of Indivisible Acadiana, Mr. Kirk Piccioni, President of Blue Democrats of Acadiana, and Leslie Bork, President of Blue, what is it?
Lady
Dems. How could I forget that? Thank you very much. I'm going to turn this over to the Secretary of Move the Mindset, who is going to further introduce the speakers. Please stand by. They're going to speak for 3 minutes, so this will not last long. I know it's warm out here. I want to thank you very much for joining us, for being interested enough to be here, and I hope that you will support our cause.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out for this press release. My name is Frank Crocco. I am the Secretary of Move the Mindset, and I am really excited to see this crowd here today because I think this taking down this statue is a long time coming. It is a symbol of hate and Jim Crow. If you look at your history, the statue was put up during a period of 1900 to 1922. That's when most of these statues were put up. They were put up after Plessy versus Ferguson. They were put up to scar and mark the land as symbols that segregation and Jim Crow was here to stay. And the next time they were put up was during the Civil Rights era as a backlash. So those who say that removing the statue is about erasing history do not know their history. This statue is not even about the Confederacy, it's about Jim Crow. Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Marja Broussard, the president of the NAACP. Marja, will you please come up?
Good evening, and I am Marja Broussard, the president of the Lafayette NAACP Unit 6060. I'm delighted to be here tonight to join forces with many other organizations who have, as part of their mission, the eradication of all symbols of hatred, injustice, and to all threats to the peaceful tranquility of our community. I'm happy to see this diverse group of people standing here together boldly to say it is not about skin color of one person or another, but fairness has no skin color. We all know the history of the statue, which we stand here today. We understand the whole story, and because it's been widely disseminated, how it was that a group of people fought to maintain the status quo of slavery. Slavery was the most abusive and wrongful system ever created in the annals of human history. Today we embark on a great task of righting that wrong. In 1922, the United Daughters of Confederacy, it was wrong for them to take the memory of a white supremacist and paste the belief of this white supremacist, the value of this white supremacist, the desire of this white supremacist upon the face of our community in the name of heritage, in the name of history. It was wrong for the group to join forces with others, evil forces across the country in the 1920s, where was the onset of the Jim Crow laws being enacted, which formed the greatest unjust system of segregation ever known to any country on the face of this earth. It's wrong to install a perpetual symbol, a sign in the form of a statue to remain for people to remind people of the ideas once fought against our great country, and remains here a symbol of how things ought to be, or how things should be again. It is wrong to want America to be great again if the America that was so great was during the time of when white supremacists fought for what they believe was their rightful place, and that is supreme being of all people. It was wrong. Therefore, we desire you here tonight the removal of this statue and any symbol in this community that leads to the divide, that continues the stigma of inferiority, which attacks minority and other people who think different, look different, act different than others who believe that they are supreme. The NAACP is the oldest civil rights organization in this nation, founded in 1909. We stand firm with Move the Mindset. We stand firm with Blue Acadiana, Indivisible Acadiana. We stand firm with the Democratic Women of Acadiana. We stand firm with you here today to do what it is that we can to lend our energies to bring about justice for all in our community. The NAACP mission has not changed from what it was 108 years ago, and that is to do what it is that we can, the original purpose of eliminating racial discrimination. Its members throughout the United States and the world are premier advocates for civil rights in our community. We believe the problem of the color line is just as important today as it was when W.E.B. Du Bois declared it in 1908. It is our prayer that the powers that be will do what is right and not allow some fabricated agreement to never take down the statue that never should have been erected in the first place. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Marja. I'd like to introduce Sally Donlin, the president of Democratic Women of Acadiana.
Y'all better get closer to this mic. I'm here. Okay. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Sally Donlin, and I began the Democratic Women of Acadiana about 6 years ago as a social media platform to share progressive information and notices. And the story I have today is a personal one. Every family has a past. And my past here in Acadiana began when my ancestor, James McFarland, traveled from Virginia to the banks of the Teche in the early 1800s to take possession of a farm his father had given to him. He brought with him, according to family archival documents, 2 wagon loads of good furniture and 12 slaves. And that's the way the manifest read. The furniture listed first, as if sticks of wood held higher value than his fellow human beings. James's slaves worked the land, producing mostly sugarcane, mostly successfully, until they no longer belonged to my family because the Great War between the states ended the official practice of slavery in this country. Think of it, though. They no longer belonged to him. The fact that my family presumed to own human beings is loathsome and shameful to me. I had nothing to do with it, but still, I often think of what that must have meant. When it's 95 degrees and I have a headache, I think about working in sweltering fields. When I hold my child near and dear, I think about the agony of being denied that basic human need. These imaginings do not monopolize my thoughts, but they are always there, hovering at the edge of my psyche. The historic reality on which these imaginings are based is real as this hunk of concrete in front of which I stand, and nothing I can do will ever change it. But still, that reality constitutes my family's original sin, by which I set my moral compass. I understand that relatively few white families today link back to actual slavery, but all of us link back to the laws and conventions that constituted slavery by another name, Jim Crow. Under Jim Crow, people of color were prevented from achieving the full freedom they deserved. The heritage of the Jim Crow era remains with us today and constitutes the original sin of all of us who give pride of public place to the symbols of the scorn and hatred that generated it. This statue behind me was erected under Jim Crow in the 1920s to intimidate our fellow citizens and human beings and to remind them that we still consider them slaves. We are powerless to change the past, but we hold the power to free our communities of these symbols of hatred and condescension today. We hold the power to place these symbols in museums where they belong, to ensure that the context of the times they represent are more fully explained to all who are truly interested in history over intimidation. We ask that these monuments to Jim Crow be relocated, not destroyed, as communities around the world have done in response to the evolution of social justice. Relocation of this statue will go a long way toward the reconciliation that we all need. Thank you.
Sally, I'd like to introduce Reverend Carlos Harvin of New Beginnings Christian Church.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We're going to make today that day. Today is the day. I'm so glad to be in your presence. I heard somebody say, where are the ministers? Well, I want you to know the ministers are here. Martin Luther King would be here. We're here. I see Father Dallas Benoit here. Bishop Larry Lloyd is here. Minister Takuna Shabazz is here. My brother from the First Presbyterian Church is here. I saw another minister somewhere around here, Minister Joe Dupree. So we're in the house. Because we know little prayer, little power. No prayer, no power. Much prayer, much. We're going to pray this statue down. That's what happened to the walls of Jericho. They came tumbling down. And I want you to know you've got power in your feet. When you march for what's right, when you march for what's just, walls come tumbling down. Alfred, you're going to start seeing this statue start moving. I know he's got Mardi Gras beads around his neck. He's in his last parade. Everybody say bye-bye, Alfred. He just had to go out with a bang. When I first moved to Lafayette in 1993, there was a television show on AOC called The Klan in Acadiana. Some of you remember that. And the host actually wore a Klan hood. You didn't see his face. So a group of us marched, we sang, we prayed, and they left town. Well, as I look around this park, and I think we need to rename this park too, I see black and white, I see a rainbow coalition, and I see Martin Luther King smiling from where he is, because the sons of former slaves, the daughters of former slaves, the sons of former slave owners, and the daughters of slave owners are sitting around this pot together at the table of sisterhood and brotherhood. Let's give God the praise. So as I take my seat, that's rare for a minister to say after just 2 minutes. This statue's got to come down. And if somebody just has to put a statue here, I can think of some other statues that could go up. Let's take Alfred down. And let's put up Frederick Douglass. Let's take Alfred down and put up Harriet Tubman. Let's take Alfred down and put up Martin Luther King. Let's take this statue down and put up Heather Heyer. Woman in Charlottesville who lost her life so that you and I could be free. Thank you very much.
I want to call Jacqueline Phelps, the Vice President of Indivisible Acadiana, to the microphone.
I am Vice President of Indivisible Acadiana. Our President, James Proctor, is out of town currently, or he would be here. He is serving his country. Indivisible Acadiana national network of indivisible groups committed to fostering informed and active citizen participation in the democratic process. Our mission is to challenge policies and practices that threaten the entry, prosperity, and security of our nation, nations around the world, and our planet itself. The Indivisible movement is premised on the belief that protecting our values, our neighbors, and our communities demands action to protect and promote the values of inclusion, tolerance, and fairness. Today, Indivisible Acadiana is proud to stand united with Move the Mindset, Blue Acadiana, NAAC Lafayette Unit number 6060, and the Democratic Women of Acadiana to propose that now is the time for the removal and relocation of the Alfred Mouton statue from its current location in the center of downtown Lafayette. Just as Indivisible Acadiana promotes active citizen participation in the democratic process on issues of the day, we also recognize that we are participants in the ongoing history of our nation. The Alfred Mouton statue and monuments like it have meant many things over the course of that history, and they seem to be talking on a new and more sinister meeting today. In 1865 and immediately thereafter, these monuments may have served a valid and valuable purpose of memorializing the dead on both sides of the Union and the Confederate conflict, our nation's bloodiest war. These statues have a place on Civil War battlefields, museums devoted to the history of the Civil War, and similar places where they may be appropriately contextualized and made to serve an educational purpose. But the Alfred Mouton statue and others like it also memorialize a darker part of our history, one that echoes eerily today, particularly after the recent events in Charlottesville, Virginia, which resulted in the death of Heather Heyer and injury to many others. The Mouton statue and others erected by various groups, particularly at the height of the Jim Crow era of racism in the 1920s, served a single purpose: to emphasize values of white supremacy and power over African American citizens in the community. It is unclear whether members of the Mouton family approved then or approved today of the nefarious use of the memory of Alfred Mouton. Indeed, some members of the Mouton family have urged that the statue be relocated. Today, these monuments have become a rallying point for white supremacist, neo-Nazi, and other groups that threaten the unity and indivisibility of our community. Consistent with our group's name, we propose that the statue be removed and relocated to a more suitable location. We recognize that the removal of a statue will only be a first step, but a necessary step towards community healing that can only come through education, dialogue, and understanding of what these statues represent and why they are harmful to so many today. With this in mind, Indivisible Acadiana joins with others in the request to take down this statue, that we may as a nation and a community be indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I'd like to call Kirk Piccioni, President of the Blue Democrats of Acadiana, to the mic.
Thank you very much. As the President of Blue Acadiana, it gives me great pleasure to lend our support to Move the Mindset in its attempt to try to have this statue relocated.
Closer to the mic.
I saw one of the signs earlier somebody was holding up. It talks about empathy. It's right over there. And it reminds me of a few Sundays ago, a priest I was listening to was talking about the decline of empathy in our country and how he felt it locally. Now, empathy, of course, is the ability to understand and share in someone else's feelings, even though that person may be very different from you and have a very different background. So I would ask everyone who can hear my voice to step out of their own shoes for just a moment and step into the shoes of just an average, middle-class black person living in the South. You work and you pay your taxes like everyone else, and your tax money goes to support and maintain the government just like everyone else's. And yet, when you walk into a government building for representation or for services, there's a monument there standing outside to someone who fought to enslave your race. When you go to court seeking justice, there's a flag flying there representing the cause of enslaving your race. When you go to a public park, not unlike the public park that we're in today, you and all who pass by are greeted by an icon to someone who fought for that cause. It's time that America came to grips with its past peacefully. It's time that we take down the symbols of Jim Crow that continue to haunt our African American brothers and sisters and move these symbols into a museum where they belong. It's time that we let go of this dark chapter in our history. It's time that we show our empathy and do the right thing. Thank you.
We're going to close with some remarks from Fred Prejean, the president, the chairman of Move the Mindset. But first, I'd like to just lead us in a simple chant. So it's an easy one. You'll be able to pick it up quickly. What do we want? Take it down. When do we want it? Now. What do we want?
Take it down.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Take it down.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Take it down.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Take it down.
When do we want it?
Now.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Rachel Foreman. I'm representing Lady Dems of Acadiana. Just wanted to say that we are behind this movement. We believe in it. We support it. I can't say anything any better than it's already been said. What I can say is that, you know, this is a horrible legacy, but even though we're faced with it, we don't have to buy it. You know, we can start over today with what's in our hearts, you know, and we might look at that and get mad, and we might want to fight, but what it really makes me want to do,
That's where we start.
I want to mention that this month of August marks our 1-year anniversary of our organization, Move the Mindset. We started with one organization of about 7 people, and here we are today. Just look around. We are now not only accompanied by you and good people like you, we are now not only one organization, but instead we are made up of a collaboration of 5 organizations. And if any of you belong to an organization that has not been named today, we'd love to have you join with us and support our cause. Bear in mind that a single press release to the city and the United Daughters of the Confederacy alone is not going to get this statue moved. It's going to take a lot more hard work. But you got to have a first step before you can have a second step. We are a peaceful, law-abiding group, and we will pursue every legal avenue available to us to achieve our goal. Thank you all for coming.
Take it down!
Facebook, Move the Mindset. You can find our educational events and our public rallies and conferences will be posted there. Please look for us on Facebook.
Are you Matthew Isaac?
Yeah.
I'm Megan. I'm a member of the Lafayette Parish Democratic Parish Executive Committee, and I've been in communication with the folks and, in support of removing the statue to another location, more of a museum. I'm actually excited today that it has been nonviolent. People came out, and it's very clear that there were some protesters protesting, the actual news conference. I got some photos of several of them, but they actually remained very civil. This is Lafayette, and I think that we can show people that we can, in fact, conduct business, respect each other's opinions, and then move forward. I mean, there is a lot of education that's needed. That was one of the gist with the Move the Mindset. And we still, in the process of educating people, especially on some of the Jim Crow area. We've had some book clubs and what have you, and we've been reading. But I think today, having the people out here standing, I know folks have tried for years to remove the statue. I was told that when the new City Hall was built, the president tried to get the statue moved, and the Daughters of the Confederacy wouldn't allow that. But you know what, they said you can't move it unless the actual property is sold. Well, maybe that should be the strategy. Maybe the strategy should be, let's get somebody to buy the property and do something else, because this building, I don't really think it's being utilized anymore. So I'll kind of mention that to the group, or you will first. Sometimes you have to strategize on some of the things that you need to do. If one thing doesn't work, move on to the next thing. And if that doesn't work, come up with another, solution. So that's what I think. But like I said, really excited that folks came out. Nobody climbed up to try to bring the statue down. I'm proud of the people of Lafayette for standing firm, on just speaking and expressing themselves. A year ago, we were out here, and not out here, actually, we spoke in front of the city council, and I shared some, personal concerns and things that I have actually experienced with them. Growing up here as a young girl, just not even knowing the importance, of what people believed was the importance of the statue. And as I find out, like I said, I do believe that it should be moved. I do know some of the Moutons, black and white, and some, it's challenging, because when you think about it, that's their ancestors, that's their family members, and while I know they don't believe in what their ancestors believed in, it's still kind of hard to make that decision to say, hey, let's just move my relative somewhere else. Let's just stomp my relative and forget that my relative is a human being and may have made some bad decisions in life, but there's an opportunity for the ancestors, like you heard some of them, to come up to the forefront and just, change that, kind of like eradicate some of those bad decisions and move forward. But I do plan on having some information in the Southern View magazine. You can find us on Facebook, you can find us online. It's an online publication that comes out on a bi-monthly basis. Thanks. You know what? It is about us educating our young folks, because I think that we have not been doing the best that we can do to educate our young folks. I mean, I think within our communities, we have a generation gap. We have some folks that fought like in the 50s and 60s, and, I'll say my generation came up and, those guys didn't pass any information on, to us. So we were kind of out there flying blind in the wind until we, got ourselves rooted
and, you know, actually got into communication with some of the leaders. But I'll tell folks, as we meet today, it's about passing the torch, and it's about providing some guidance for our young folks so that they're not flying blind in the wind and actually just standing up for anything. You know, I mean, if they don't know their history, they don't know where they came from, then they're out there just talking about every and anything that everybody said, and there's nothing solid, there's nothing concrete about it. So we have some work to do. We have got to educate our young folks. You're welcome.
My name is Takuna Malana El Shabazz, and I'm president of CCBE, Conscientious Council of Black Elders, here out of Lafayette. My impression of tonight's event, I think that on one end, it's certainly a worthy cause to remove racist symbols that has been erected, you know, under circumstances in an era when they should not have been. But I think that we need to be mindful as a black community not to fall short of our understanding of what history means and what those symbols have impacted our community and how they have impacted our community. And the symbol of a statue today as being taken down across America is certainly a valid effort, and it should be done. However, Lafayette has a unique situation. That unique situation is that we want to resist white supremacy. That statue represents a symbol of white supremacy. But the statue in itself is an innate object. It's the living form of white supremacy that is holding black folks down in Lafayette. So if you're going to deal with the statue of Alfred Mouton, for all the reasons that were stated, for the historical misrepresentations, for the amplifying the Jim Crow laws, for resisting white supremacy, well then black folks should understand that the whole Cajun Acadiana concept is a form of living white supremacy. So while we remove the innate statue of white supremacy, we should remove the living statue of white supremacy that is being placed in our mind. When you have young black girls and young black boys don't want to be black anymore, they want to be Cajun and Creole and think they're from Acadiana, don't know nothing about Africa. That is living white supremacy. So the mindset that drew up these statues across America is the mindset that's alive today in Lafayette under the disguise of Cajun Acadiana. So therefore, I say remove all the forms of white supremacy. And as far as Cajun Acadiana is concerned, it is a government-funded nigger-making process for black people all over again. If white folks want to call themselves Cajun, I as a black person who values self-determination, do not argue with any group to choose what they choose to call themselves by any name. However, it should be done in the private sector with private money. When you begin to use tax dollars in order to rename everyone and everything of worth under one history, one culture, that is white supremacy, that is colonialism in action. That statue is an innate object. If it's moved today, it's not going to make one bit of difference for the economic, political, and cultural genocide that is being committed in Lafayette right now with the Cajun Acadiana. So the removal of the statue, in my mind, my impression is like removing a flea from an elephant's behind. It makes no difference. It's just a little irritant to the elephant. However, we must understand the real source and core of white supremacy and fight it to its roots.
As a
Conscientious Council of Black Elders.
There's one encourage the generation coming up under you to be out here more often.
Well, much of the goals and objectives that were set tonight, the words are beautiful. I don't disagree with the words. I don't think we understand the depth of those words the same way. When we talk about education, certainly education is important. When we talk about getting people involved and being inclusive, those are words and concepts that are meaningful to any rational, intelligent, fair-thinking person, whether he be white, black, blue, green, or any other color. However, when those words are used by individuals that seem to contradict the very concept of what it applies to us here in this area, then that becomes an area in which makes me concerned whether the persons that are using those beautiful words truly understand the problem that exists here in Lafayette especially under this whole concept of Cajun Acadiana. I can live with this statue. If it's on private ground and then public monies is not dealing with it, I don't care what they do with it. But in the concept of getting rid of white supremacy, when systematically black people are being taught to hate themselves and use a name in reference to their history, their worth, their culture, you know, in the name of a historical derogatory term that was equivalent to the word nigger, then that in itself is a contradiction, and I think it's the foundation of hypocrisy when we use those words and not address that issue.
And now as a future pharmacist, any last words for the generation coming up?
Yes, I believe, and I have a lot of faith in the upcoming generation. I believe what we see in our young people today is based on what we taught them. Many of them are beginning to question what has been taught to them, and they're beginning to rebel. And as they rebel, they're going to want more understanding of why they're rebelling. And the knowledge must be there. We must not hesitate in telling the truth, no matter who accepts it, who rejects it, how comfortable it is or how uncomfortable it is. We in a period of time in human history where the truth has to reign and the truth has to be said and the truth has to be acted out regardless of how unpleasant it may be to the ears of some. Thank you.
Yeah. It just brought awareness to the community that everybody is equal. I like the speakers. Everybody had a valid point. Everything was neutral. I actually know a guy who worked at, I know a guy who dedicates his time and his lifestyle to promoting positive and got an awesome song. Lafayette is amazing. Progress has been made today. Progress has been made today.
I know. Like the future kids, grandkids, anybody coming up under us.
Yeah.
Today, what would those final words be?
It's only one race, the human race.
I'm really pumped and excited that so many people turned out and there's so much support in the community, and that we've been able to link to so many other organizations. And I think we have a great momentum, and I look forward to the response from the city, especially the council. I want to know where they are. No fear. I grew up in Lafayette. The 60s, I was in college and asleep. I was also at Catholic high school where we were basically asleep, you know, not paying attention. The one thing that we heard was disparaging remarks about the possible integration of our school. And I know that our Bishop, Sheck Snyder, dragged his feet and fought it tooth and nail. And I didn't see any point to it, and I still don't see any point to it. I was away from the city for 22 years, living out west, and came back 6 years ago, and still staggered to see that not much mentally and in the mindset here in Lafayette has ever changed. People are going on, what's the quote, give them bread and circus and keep them occupied. And so we have lots of wonderful festivals, and yes, there's some joint festivals and those kinds of things. But I don't think there's a deeper understanding on the whole, especially of white folks and what you live through every day.
Well, you have a lot of positive energy, and I can see the optimism in your eyes.
Yeah.
So what keeps you going? What keeps you positive? Ready to make us do this every day?
My own personal spirituality, meditation. I'm still part of the church on occasion. And then being united with other people, seeing that, for so long you're just like thinking that I had to do it all or that I was going to be the big champion, knowing that I have to step back really and say to the black community, how may I be of service to you? I'm sorry for what's happened in the past, for my part, conscious or unconscious, for my ancestors, and how might I be of service to you? And I need to take the lead from you, and that's why I'm so pleased to find Move the Mindset with Fred. and his.
And I'm glad you said our ancestors. As a future ancestor, what advice would you love to leave behind for the future generations of warriors to come?
Wow. Be awake. Don't be afraid. Step out of your comfort zone. Go where you're not comfortable. Venture out of your safe neighborhood, what you think is a safe neighborhood, and go see how other people are living, get to know them, visit their churches. Just get out of your own neighborhood, get out of your own ghetto mentally and physically. Experience.
I know you didn't have it. Right or wrong?
It's been a struggle.
I know you.
It's been a struggle, bro. We fought some fights. We fought some fights. Yeah, to be at it.
Someone I share office with, we were talking about it today, about the statue, and should it be removed or shouldn't it be removed? And I asked the question to the person, I said, do you have a sister? He said, yeah. I said, if someone was to snatch your sister from her home in the night,
You're looking for your past.
rape her, beat her, if someone wants to leave her for dead, kill her, lynch her, would you want a statue of that person on your front lawn? And he said, hell no. So why would we want this on our front lawn? It needs to go, period. It needs to go. Some people say destroy it. You can't destroy history. Whether you destroy this thing or not, history remains. And you can't destroy history. So history museums were created to have ornaments of history placed there. This is not history. I mean, this is not a museum. Every time we walk by, if our kids ask us what that is, it represents Jim Crow, the worst time, one of the worst eras in American history for African Americans. You had the lynching, white supremacy, and so on and so forth. So my question to those people who disagree would be, if your daughter was snatched from her home, raped, hung, killed, would you want the statue of the person on your front lawn? And I'm gonna leave you with that. Thank you. I mean, really, would you want it? Would you want that statue there? You have to personalize that.
Given the history, all you got to do is go look at he was a vigilante.
Yeah. I didn't realize he was only 35. So that was a little bit. I mean,
just as well be kin to General Mouton, because we have the highest incarceration rate in the world. The unjustly denied parole eligibility to over half of our people, many of whom are first offenders. So let's bring some economic development over here. Let's bring jobs.
What if I'm not good at it?
Why is it not?
Well, because I went to this, I was looking at this one website that had...
Hello, how are you?
I'm
Authello.
It was nice to meet you.
I'm Charles. Joey.
I might have met you before.
Oh, yeah.
This beat right now is my mood as fuck. So I'ma just go and fuck it up. Yeah.